Welcome to the Ignited Recovery Podcast, a new way forward for anyone looking for answers but feeling left out. If you've been searching for empowerment, triumph, and purpose, you've found them right here. You won't hear the same solutions, and you're not going to have any excuses to fall back on, because Ignited Recovery allows heroes to rise and become their best selves. I'm Dr. Addict, and I can't wait to be your guide on this journey. Are you ready to become an ignited hero? Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Recovery Secrets Podcast. I'm Addict, and I'm here today with a friend. I consider Alex, who you're going to meet here in a moment, as a mentor, a friend, somebody who I really get to connect with on a regular basis, whether it's through social media work, his podcast, or actually in the coaching work that I do myself. Yeah, so many of the things that I talk to Alex about give me insight about ways to run my day-to-day business primarily is what he affects me with. But then what ended up happening, and one of the reasons that we ended up recording this podcast, is Alex paid attention to this once an addict, always a fill-a-blank line campaign that we ran, and he made this comment in one of the mastermind sessions that we had online, that he sort of sees himself as somebody who's addicted, but just addicted to the process and the ongoing success of his business and what it takes to serve his mission and purpose in life. And if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you know how important purpose is for me. And so when I heard Alex say this, that he actually looks at this term addiction and has talked about himself being an addict, but addicted to this element of success, I really, really wanted to have this conversation with him. So I brought him on, and we had what I think is a really, really insightful discussion. You can almost kind of call it a debate, because I brought up this point that the language we use is so important. Alex is big on language, so he agrees with me. And I think sometimes we don't even understand or consider the specific terms that we use. And so Alex and I had an amazing conversation about this. You're going to hear about this concept of, can you turn the term addict into something good? And are there other options that might serve you better? And I think the tease is that there are, and Alex is going to give you a term that he uses that I like much, much better than the one he brought up in our conversation. So you're going to hear about that, but maybe more importantly for you, you're going to hear about how to lock in to your purpose. You're going to hear about how to set up your life and think of these things that you might have thought of as weaknesses for yourself, but turn them into strengths so you can really show up for your life on a daily basis, do what you're meant to do, not shy away from who you are, but rather go all in on finding that key, that like the finest version of who you are and who you can be in the future. Alex is an incredible person to listen to. You're going to love this episode. And if you've ever in your life struggled with the concept of, do I need to shift careers? Do I need to shift what I do because I'm not really satisfied in my life as it stands right now? I think you're going to absolutely love this episode.
Life is interesting. Life is interesting. I don't think this will make it into the episode, but I think we just got Michigan and Nevada, or at least we're really, really close. So,
oh yeah,
let's see.
We did not. I did not watch any of it last night.
Yeah, I mean, we watched some of it, but we interrupted with other things because I also knew I will have no idea what's happening. So it was like one of those things of, spend more time worrying about the things you have control over, including like connecting with my wife and sitting watching. Have you watched The Queen's Gambit? Have you guys watched that at all?
Just started it.
Yeah. So it's like,
we just started. We've watched like 20 minutes of the first episode. It looks super interesting.
Yeah. So we just watched the first and a half yesterday. How you doing, man?
I'm good. I think that, the way I approached this week, I was pretty sure that there was going to be like serious conflict, and I don't think we're going to know the end of this result. Like, I think it's going to be December.
I said at least a month. So yeah, I think December, early December.
Like sometime in December. In fact, it's funny, Adi, the astrological books that have like predictions for the United States, the books that were published 3 and 4 years ago predicted this week.
Whoa, wow.
Like predicted everything that happened this week. It's bizarre. Like the energy is it is sometimes it is what it is.
Yeah, I told my wife about, you put out a quote one time that millionaires don't listen to astrologers, but billionaires do. Um, and I love that because, first of all, it's something I never would have expected from you. Secondly, you think back on kings and all that kind of shit, and those motherfuckers, they had their own soothsayers and witches and everything on their own side. Like, here's my, we actually got an interview canceled today because our power went out. It actually went back up an hour ago, so I'm happy we got it for this. But it's so funny, right? In the context of the stuff I do with you, like, you need information.
Yeah,
we all need information. So if it's other sources of information that you can doubt or not, it's still information, and you can glean from it whatever you want. So it's a really interesting way of looking at the world. My wife is all into it, so I get that view for sure.
I was never into it, Adi. I used to laugh at people who were into stuff like that. Yep. And then really a few things happened. One was, when I was younger, I kept encountering really incredibly wealthy people who would like have their medium with them, or who would stop a meeting, walk out, call somebody and come back. And I'm like, who'd you call? Oh, just this person who helps me see things. And I'm like, see things, And so the wealthier person I was around, the more often that stuff came up. But then I'm data driven, man. When you look at the data around full moons and you look at the data around like some of the astrological stuff, it's undeniable that it actually has a massive effect on the population. So
it's undeniable that it has an effect for sure, at least the information as it gets put out. And then being a science guy, I remember, have we talked about this before? Have you ever been exposed to Bruce Lipton?
I know who Bruce Lipton is. Yeah, for sure.
So he wrote this book, which is like one of my Bibles.
Oh yeah. I've got the biology of belief. I didn't match his name up with that book, but yeah.
So, he talks about the nuance, like epigenetic things around the way we interact between the environment and our actual biology, and how not only they're not separate, but like your cells were essentially just created to measure what the environment is doing and needs. And so he talks about this concept. I never heard anybody talk about it in this way, and I didn't think you and I were going to talk about it today, but I know where I want our conversation to fit in, so this might actually end up making it in there. He said, we're so resistant to the concept that energy matters.
Yep.
And we're so resistant because we're matter-based people. So we can understand that there's like a neurotransmitter that hits a receptor and it does a thing to release another chemical that hits another receptor. We understand that because, if you hit me over the head, I feel the actual feeling in my head and I can connect. Oh, so there's a neurotransmitter that connects in that physical way. He said, when it comes to energy, we have a really hard time understanding that somebody else's energy could affect us, or that things in nature have an energy. He said, but that energy works. He said, you hear things all the time, and the way you hear them is by waves, sound waves. And what are sound waves? It's just another way of saying the energy of sound, right? There's a vibration. That vibration is not matter. It's an energy. It's a force in the world. And it travels. Right now, it's even more insane, right? It's traveling from my mouth to this electrical thing that does conduct actual like movement. That changes things. It goes into a computer, complete energy, like electrical energy that just gets transported into the universe, then back to you through your speakers into your head. The same with light. The way we see things is not by matter. It's eventually it gets to matter in your eyes and receptors, but before that, it's an energy.
Yeah.
If you can understand that, why couldn't there be dozens or hundreds of other forms of energy in the world that we just don't know how to measure yet and we don't understand? And it could be, when somebody says they have a bad vibe,
that's energy.
That could literally be like a transmission of energy, and you just feel
it literally is.
It is, yeah.
It is. So when I was on my honeymoon, Katie and I were in Sedona. So we went to Sedona for our honeymoon. And we hung out at like the energy vortexes and stuff. And like, you can totally feel a different energy there, and the trees grow in a corkscrew and like all that stuff. Yeah. You start looking at the data and the evidence around you and like, there's something happening here. Yeah. And we met a woman who worked with Masaru Emoto, and she was giving a lecture on this book, The Hidden Messages in Water. And we caught like the last 45 minutes of this lecture, and it was life-changing for me. Like seeing the pictures of the water that had reacted to different stimuli and how water has memory. This was like enough data for me to, not enough. This was like transformational data. I'm like, wait a second. We can measure the effect that an energetic item has on water. So I came home from my honeymoon and I'm like, I'm going to test this. So I did like the rice experiment where you write love and gratitude on one bottle and hate on another and nothing on another, and you put rice in it. And like the hate bottle gets moldy way faster than the love and gratitude bottle and the control. And the love and gratitude looks better for way longer. Right. And then I was like, okay, what else can I do? So I started growing plants, and I grew plants where like I talked positively to one plant, yelled at another plant, left another plant alone. The plant you talk positively grows like crazy. The plant you yell at kind of withers away. And the plant that you leave alone does okay, like a normal plant would. But the difference between the left alone plant and the talk to plant, night and day. And so you start seeing that like there is actual ways not only to prove out that there's an energetic in the world, but you can actually create real data and real evidence that there's an energetic in the world. And this, I don't know if you've seen his most recent book, The Hidden Power of Water, but they went back and redid a lot of the experiments, and they got even more profound data with new equipment. It's incredible.
That's crazy. That's crazy. So what a weird intro, because I followed your work so much. And obviously I worked together through one of your actual coaching programs. And the way I saw this fit in, and I know I was on a call with you a little bit ago, and you said something on the heels of our Once an Addict campaign that I thought was really relevant, and I want to talk to my people about. And I appreciate and honor so much of, again, this thing we're talking about, the study that you put into life experience, and you share that you have had some challenges in your own past. You know, I watched some of your talks when you talk about the weight that you had put on, the unhealthy way in which you lived, and all these massive transformations that you have taken on in your life. And it's incredible. And then you said this thing on this talk that was, you know, you listened to the Once an Addict campaign and how I'm trying to shift people's notion from, if you're an addict at one point in time, you'll be an addict for anything. And you did this thing that some people do, which is switch it into a positive element of addiction, right? And you said, I feel like I still have an addictive tendency to me. It's just that I now focus it on this compulsive need to do better, be better, achieve, succeed, help more entrepreneurs do better, etc. And what I loved about it is that it created the dichotomy to me of language. What do I mean by that? For most people who are listening right now, almost no matter what your individual experience is with addiction, you've seen it, you've heard it, you know somebody, or you've watched the movies about it, you have an idea about what a quote unquote addict is. It's primarily a negative concept. It is rare that the word gets used positively. And I don't believe that there's anything inherent in the word. What ends up happening instead is that we manifest this way of looking at the world around us. Just like you mentioned with the water, right? Just like we mentioned before with astrology or any of this kind of more esoteric stuff. And because the predominant way of talking about the term, literally ADDICT, addict, when you say it is primarily negative, what ends up happening when you allow that in to the conversation is you bring with it a lot of that baggage, knowingly or unknowingly, willingly or unwillingly, it doesn't even matter. You bring it in, just like the yelling at the rice or the yelling at the plants creates this change, this alteration in something, this unknown. And I'm trying to do my best to create a world in which it's not that people are unbiased. Saying unbiased is stupid. Like, there's going to be a bias. I'm saying I want people to create a positive bias towards as much of what they can in their own life. Because look, again, research, it just shows us over and over and over. Stop trying to be a realist. Achieve for a little bit more than realist, right? Like shoot for just over what is really possible. Shoot for just above what you think is you're capable of right now, because your wishing and your desire to be there actually creates the opportunity to be in that place. And I feel like you do that with the people you work with, literally creating systems, et cetera, for people. So I wanted to I thought that could be a cool jumping off point because you're so particular about language and you've created some massive changes in your own life. And I want to hear more and talk more about how you've been able to do that.
Cool. Yeah, no, I think that's a great place for us to start. You know, Adi, when I look at the term addiction, you know, I think some of the most committed people in the history of the world were addicted to what they were doing. You know, I think when you look at Thomas Edison and 10,000 tries to create a light bulb, there was compulsive addictive behavior in that equation, massively compulsive and addictive behavior.
Sure.
You know, we're talking 7 days a week, 14 hours a day sometimes of you know, with a wife and kid, but being down in a garage, separated from everyone with a small team around him, testing every single material he could to see if it would you know, survive as a filament of a light bulb.
Yep.
And when you look at that behavior, that is, you know, today we would call that obsessive compulsive, OCD, you know, maniacal. There's all types of labels that we would slap on it. But the reality is the guy made night and day. And so
I think like one of hundreds of things that he changed about the world.
Oh my God. If you look at Ted Edison's entire resume, it's ridiculous. The swivel chair that he created, you know, that like there's so much around us that was created originally by Edison's or his team, his group, right? He had a group of people who worked with him. But when you look at that, you know, I often make the joke when I'm speaking, 10,000 tries to make a light bulb. You know, today it's this mythical like explanation of human achievement. But if Edison was around today and he was blowing up glass in his garage for 14 hours a day, he'd probably get picked up by the police and be on like Wellbutrin or something, you know? And but that's reality. You know, we don't respect the reality behind human achievement. We want to soften what it really looks like. We want to make it look easier than it is. We want to make it look different than it is. But if you look at human beings who have created massive outcomes in the world, they have all had behaviors that today we would refer to in negative terms.
Perfect. So to me, that's a great way to kind of talk about this thing, right? Of these words have gotten co-opted. You know, addict has just become the shorthand of describing somebody who, maybe is compulsive and obsessive, and maybe that's what started. But what we're describing is somebody who had all these negative consequences, and then on top of it, then is unable to control themselves, cannot find motivation or the ability to change, and then some other more terrible things, right? Like is unmotivated, is a liar, will steal, will tell you anything to your face that you need to hear in order for them to get their next hit. Like all those other things have now become associated with it. And if what we were saying is, man, Alex, you know, you're really like obsessive about this entrepreneurship thing, I'd be like, hey, cool. that sounds like a great way of talking about it. I wonder where the line is between allowing people to focus on the particular elements of what makes them unique and special, and how much we need to, how much we need to kind of create these umbrella terms that are never really nuanced. They're never good. You know, you have a kind of a pitch for your entrepreneurial personality type thing, right? If anybody listening to this right now doesn't have this book and you want to understand yourself, by the way, even from an addiction kind of standpoint, you read that book, you understand sometimes why you just can't let the bone go. Like you just got to keep going. And that's what I loved about your stuff on the front end. So what you've done a lot of times, you've taken somewhat negative language and you flipped it, but you have to give it another word. Because if you said to everybody, hey, are you a success addict? I feel like the pitch would be different and a different group of people would connect to what you're doing than if you said, hey, are you this evolutionary hunter? Are you
different?
You know, it would be totally different because the people who take on addict, alcoholic, whatever those other terms are, have this built-in shame about who they are as people. And I think what you do so well is you help people find their path from no matter where they are right now to where they want to get.
Yeah, you know, I think there's a little more to it for me, Adi. You know, when I look at extraordinary people, you know, so maybe if I give you a little of my backstory, you know, as a kid, I was different than everybody. And I felt isolated and unique and not unique in a good way. You know, I was the kid who I knew I was different because I would see evidence of it in the world. You know, adults would do stuff like when I was walking with a group of kids, they'd go, oh, look, there's Jennifer and Johnny and Alex. and I could hear it. You know, I knew that it was happening. And so I always knew that I was like uniquely different and not in a, and the reflection I was getting was that it wasn't in a positive way.
Yeah.
So as a young kid, I started reading personal development, and personal development at the very beginning, it helped me. I read some Wayne Dyer, I read a little Tony Robbins. Then I'm like, I'm going all in on personal development. And the more I read, the more conflict it created. The more contradiction there was in different personal development opinions. If you read 10 personal development books, they will all tell you to go in 10 different directions.
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening was I transitioned. I started just reading about successful people. I wanted to understand how to create success. So I started reading about successful people. And here's what's crazy, Adi. If you read about successful people, here's what you'll find. You'll find everything in the DSM-5, like, or DSM-4 or DSM-3, like depending on what you want to call it and what group of people you believe voted on some disease. But you know, when you look at successful people, here's what you see throughout history. There is quirks and there is weird behaviors and obsessive behaviors and compulsions. And like, you know, we were just talking about Edison. He's a good example. Edison proposed to his wife and he thought he was doing something very romantic. He tapped out, "Will you marry me?" on her arm in Morse code. It didn't occur to him that she didn't know Morse code, and he was offended he didn't get an answer. Like, that's how different this guy was. He named his kids Dot and Dash because of his obsession with Morse code. So like you look at these people throughout history. In the present, we think of Edison as like this gifted inventor, amazing human being. Dude, he was as awkward as they come.
Yeah.
You know, today we'd probably put him on the Asperger's spectrum of some sort. And
I feel like I'm on the Asperger's.
Oh, I mean, I'm confirmed on the Asperger's spectrum. And I actually look at it as a badge of honor because if you look at, I mean, Einstein didn't talk until he was 4, but then spoke in paragraphs, never learned how to tie his shoes in his entire life, just wore loafers. He's like, it's too hard. I don't want to do that. There's other things I need to do. And so when you know, Pythagoras, he discovered, or Pythagoras with math, like he went up against everyone and would not admit he was wrong because he knew he was right, and they killed him for it. And so when you look throughout history, these behaviors that today, here's, you know, I think addiction has been around since the beginning of time, but I think that there's a lot of what you said. I think for a lot of people who show up as a little more obsessive than other people, a little more maybe energetic or involved than other people, a little different than other people, there is so much shame put on us. And I know it was for me as a kid. Like, I felt shameful that I didn't do well in school. I felt shameful that physiologically I wasn't as strong or as coordinated as everybody else. I still have body dysmorphia off the charts. You know, I think today, when I look in the mirror, I still see a fat guy, and I like, it doesn't go away. And I know that it's body dysmorphia because if I'm ever at a gym and I see my reflection without my head, I'm like, oh, that guy's in shape. As soon as I come around the corner, my head's in the picture, I'm like, wow, that guy's fat. So it's instant how quickly it changes. Yeah. And I think a lot of those things were things that weren't inherent in me. They were given to me by the people around me, or they were put on me by the people around me. And so I think a lot of people with addiction today are actually the most talented people on the planet, that their abilities, their quirks, the directions, you know, their creativity was put back on them in such a way that it came out in destructive, addictive behaviors.
Yeah. I mean, so the way I talk to my people about that is I literally summarize essentially what you got just kind of said right now, is saying, look, we've all been told we're broken for years, oftentimes for decades. And in order to deal with the feelings around this notion that we don't fit in, we're broken, we're different, we started coming up with coping strategies.
Yep.
Donuts are fucking great. If donuts don't work for you, you down some alcohol, you don't care about what anybody is saying.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. You do some lines of blow, you feel like Superman. If that doesn't work, you shoot up some heroin or you pop some pills. Like, there are ways to make the noise in the world, and we'll get to pressure and noise here in a minute too. Yeah. There are ways to make the noise in the world calm down for all of us. And that's exactly what I'm saying is the reason we develop the thing we later become called addicts for is to overcome the despair and the shame that came up around just being the best version of ourselves that felt unaccepted. And by the way, everybody listening, they were unaccepted in like elementary school and junior high and high school, and maybe the beginning of college. No offense to those people, but fuck them. Like, I couldn't care less what the people in my elementary school and junior high think about me right now. Like,
right now.
Like, it doesn't it doesn't even enter the space in my head. But at the time, it felt like the worst it was like this endless hell that I would be trapped in. And so the word addict has now, for me, and the reason I want to have this conversation is I appreciate your content and the way you look at things so much. I want to kind of be able to look at this from different directions. The word addict has now been tainted. It's been tainted as this really bad thing. Being obsessive is not tainted. I am all in on being obsessive. Like, we have a goal. You're the one who made me, by the way, have a Hall of Fame goal. And my Hall of Fame goal is to lower the divorce rate in the US and to help over 1 million people with what we do beat their addiction forever, right? So like, those are my long-term goals. I fully believe that both of them are worthwhile being obsessive for the rest of my life on to solve that. And so that's this place that I try to play in all the time because I don't want to alienate anybody, right? I'm here to help whoever needs help. Language almost doesn't matter for me. But what I found is that there are a lot of people like me who have been through these different experiences. And now every time somebody even mentions the word, there's this like wave of feelings of unworthiness and lack and shame and embarrassment that kind of wash over us.
Yeah, no question. Yeah, and I think it's even more than that. Like I agree with you. Today, I could care less what anybody from my history had said about me when I was younger. But when I was in second grade, I was in an experimental classroom where it was second and third grade, and there was 2 teachers because there was 60 kids or 50 kids instead of one class. And I heard the teachers having a discussion, and they referred to me as retarded. And I heard it. I overheard the comment that I was retarded. And so in second grade, I went and looked that up, and I figured out what it was. And so I identified with it fully and totally. I'm like, this makes sense. Like, this is finally the answer. It's because I'm wired in a way that's so broken compared to everybody else. This is why I screw everything up. This is why I can't get good grades. This is why the teachers hate me. This is why like school has been so tough. And also when I was younger, I had a habit of exaggerating things and making things up and trying to like kind of manipulate the world around me. Sure. And so when I saw this word retarded, I'm like, okay, so now it makes sense. And that judgment, that colored and shaped a lot of what I felt like, who I was as a kid. And so it was so confusing to D, because in second grade, I was called retarded. And then third grade, I was put in a normal classroom. Fourth grade, I was put in gifted and talented. And so, because they IQ tested me in the interim, and I had an extraordinary high IQ. And so then I was put in gifted and talented classes. So I went from like special education to a normal class, to gifted and talented, back to a normal class, back to gifted and talented. It was like this incredibly frustrating, path. But I think a lot of people who end up in a place where they are in an unhealthy addiction go through something like that. They go through some type of a judgment and shame and blame and process like that, where you end up feeling like who you are is not valid. And then here's what I think happens. The strengths we have, like the strength of obsession, the strength of being myopic, the strength of chasing something to the very end, becomes the weakness of doing way too much cocaine, or being the guy who can drink the most at the party, or or having to do the same thing every day, even when it's not progressive and it's actually destroying your life, like having that obsession with doing the same thing and offloading in the same way. And so, I actually have this theory, and it's in the book. You alluded to it, that addictive behavior actually comes from us feeling like we're not in momentum, like we're not doing what we're supposed to do in the world, like we're not in the motion that we're supposed to be in. We're not in our place where we're actually achieving what we want. And when we feel that loss of momentum, we will go to anything to find it.
Bro, Sundays, by midday through Sunday, I'm over the weekend. I'm like, I had a day and a quarter or a day and a half off. Like, what are we doing?
Why am I not productive right now? Yeah, like I want to do something.
Projects to be like 100% every week. Sophie now knows it. So like by the middle of a Sunday, she goes, "Do you need to go read something, or like go look at your email, or just go and then come back in a couple of hours and be a normal human being again?"
So I've actually set it up, Adi, so where my kids take their screen time on Sunday afternoons, I already know I have a block of time. So for the whole weekend, I'm like aiming at that block of time, because, and here's how I look at it. I think I have this completely different view of what it means to be somebody who's addicted or obsessive. I think that there's a small percentage of the population that's different than the rest of the world, that's driven in a different way, that has desires in a different way, but also has a level of talent and ability that's different than the rest of the world. And sometimes that talent and ability isn't immediately identifiable. When if you look at Helen Keller for most of her life, especially the beginning of her life, it looked like there was zero talent and ability there. In fact, she was like mean and aggressive and difficult to get close to, difficult to talk to, because she lived in such a world of pressure and noise. And when she found some people who helped her remove some of that pressure and noise and understand a little bit more and begin communicating, this massive well of talent erupted, and she went on to change the world for people who have different abilities. And so, I think that happens to so many people where they don't get the support that they need. And so those talents don't come out. And, I always tell people, I think there's far more entrepreneurs in jail and in an early grave than there are successfully running companies, because entrepreneurs feel the personality type we have feels such a high level of judgment for the world. We're the kids who don't sit still, don't show up like everybody else, don't talk like everybody else, read like everybody else, do the same things as everybody else. And in our society today, we label those people and medicate them and try and fix them. And if you look at all of history, the kid that didn't walk like everyone else, talk like everyone else, show up like everyone else, and do the same things as everyone else went on to change the world.
Oh, yeah. So I love what you're just saying right now, because so many of the people who come to me, they use this term. I don't know if you've ever heard this. Well, you work with entrepreneurs. I feel like entrepreneurs never want to be normal. I come to people who they say to me, I just want to be normal again. Yeah. And I look at them and I'm like, no, you don't.
No.
First of all, normal doesn't exist. Normal is some weird average we took of all the people in the world. So we created this image, and rom-coms have it, and like all these books have it. All these imagined realities around us have created this notion of what normal is. Not only does it not exist, but you are not it. And if you try to be normal your whole life, here's the only thing that's going to end up happening. You will either be completely uncomfortable trying to reach a goal that is unreachable, or you will get there to what you think is normal, and everybody will think you're normal, and then you will hate it, because you're going to put yourself in a place where you have to live a life that doesn't feel real to you. And I try to release so many of the people that come to me. And again, it's why I love what you do with people. I come to a place where I say to people, look, your job is just to find out who you are at your core, and then go all in on that person. And you talk, maybe we can bring in this concept of pressure and noise. You talk a lot about, when I talk to people about the stress and the anxiety in their life and the things that are not serving them and how to eliminate them, you've given a very easy kind of way of talking about it. Yeah. And you talk about pressure and noise. And there was an exercise you give in a lot of your work. For those of you listening right now, I'm going to make Alex give you a freebie. So listen up and take notes. There was an exercise you did at one of the 2CCX or something, like workshops that you do with a lot of people very easily, very quickly, to kind of get people honest and ready to release some of that pressure and noise. So first of all, explain what pressure and noise is, and then if you don't mind, just walking us through a quick one.
So pressure and noise so here's how I look at it. I think as a human organism, we are constantly in a battle for focus and for awareness and to be present and be doing the things that we want to do. And we are constantly exposed to what I call pressure and noise. And it's anything, Adi. It's chemicals in our food. It's the environmental toxins that we're exposed to. It's negative people. It's the challenges around us. And it's for each individual person, pressure and noise has a different definition, but universally, it's anything that's taking momentum away from you. It's anything that's slowing you down. It's anything that's making you feel weighed down. It's anything that's causing anxiety or frustration or confusion or any of those things. And for I think one of the challenges that we have in the world today is that we categorize these things and we make them different, and we try and pretend like one doesn't affect us like the other. But the reality is we can only take so much pressure and noise in the present to where we start misfiring significantly, to where we don't see the future that we really want to create, to where we get into a fight or flight place because we have evolutionary survival instincts that when pressure and noise gets high enough, this is what in reality scientifically happens. Our peripheral vision narrows, the future comes closer, options go down to very few. We feel compelled to make rapid decisions and make them very quickly. And when you look at all of those behaviors, those are behaviors that rob us of what we really want from our lives.
Yeah.
And so
that's an important thing for everybody to hear, right? Is I know myself when I had to do this exercise, sort of letting go and just being honest with the things that are causing it. Look, I'll be honest, and most people, if you do this exercise, you'll feel it too. There are parts where you feel like an asshole. You're like, but shouldn't I do this? Like, isn't this part of what I have to do because I'm a student, a teacher, a parent, a lover, a husband, whatever? We have these roles that we've taken on, and sometimes the roles themselves have loaded us up with this pressure and noise.
Are you talking about the 2-week time study, Adi, or are you talking about
that's even more complicated for people. You made me do this exercise where I think it was like maybe 3 minutes. You gave us like 3 minutes. It wasn't a lot of time. And you said, take a sheet of paper and put down a list of all the things that are causing you pressure and noise.
Yeah, in categories. So people, places, and things that are causing you pressure and noise. And I do this in a lot of groups of entrepreneurs. I'll say, okay, like everybody stop, take out a blank sheet of paper. Here's what we're going to do for the next 3 minutes, for the next 5 minutes, we're going to write down all the things that are causing us massive pressure and noise. And maybe even the things that aren't causing that much massive pressure and noise, like the light switch in your office is broken or your car door squeaks or whatever, little and small. Get down as many things as you possibly can. And what's interesting is what happens is when somebody's done with that sheet of paper, here's what's normally very interesting. Everything or most of the things that are causing them shame in the current moment are on that sheet of paper. Most of the things that are causing them to feel blamed are on that sheet of paper. Most of the things in their lives where they feel anxious or frustrated entering into a situation are on that sheet of paper. And when we sit down and we inventory, what is it? People, places, things that are causing us pressure and noise. It's very confronting because we recognize how much of it we are now allowing. Like in some cases, not just allowing, but accepting and inviting into our lives. And so for entrepreneurs, I have this way of looking at things. I think for us, everything gets easier as pressure and noise goes down. Yeah. I also think on the corollary, everything gets harder as pressure and noise goes up, especially tactically more difficult. And so the way that I coach and the way that I coach my team, myself, is relentlessly and constantly, how do we remove pressure and noise from our lives?
And for me, the reason I think this is so powerful, I don't know if anybody else listening is the kind of person I'm about to describe, but for me, I kind of grew up with this mentality that I have to figure it all out. Like I have to do it. And literally, as we're talking right now, there are these. So we moved into this house about a year ago, and the LED lights that they put in this house were at like 6,000 Kelvin, which is, it's not even like sunlight. It's bright, like fluorescent.
Yeah, that's like lab lights.
Warehouse lights. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's terrible. It's not something you want to look at all day. But during the day, it makes things look super bright and very clean. So that's why they did it, maybe, or maybe it was cheap. I don't know. Long story short, I had to find replacements for them. Bought the replacements. There's now 80 replacements because there's a ton of these LED lights all over my house, sitting in a closet. And I can't tell you, maybe every day, but maybe even 2 to 3 times a day, walking through the house, I'm like, oh shit, I have to replace those things. So literally, as we're talking right now, I'm thinking to myself, I got to figure out a solution to just get that thing taken care of. And first of all, either handle it myself quickly or pay somebody some money to come in here, spend an hour and a half replacing. It's a really easy process. But I've probably thought about it for 4, 5, 6 hours in the last month. And that shame that has washed over me has kind of made me not enjoy my day or not feel like a good person, not believe that I can achieve what I can achieve, really because of some stupid LED lights in a closet. It doesn't matter as much as it matters in my head.
100%. And here's what's interesting about that story is that for entrepreneurial personality types, we inherently know we need more help than the average person for a lot of reasons. One, because we want to do more than the average person, so we need more help. It's just part of it. But also because we have sensitivities that the average person doesn't have. The story you just told, maybe not in your audience and maybe not with the people we're talking to, but there's some people that would be like, get over it. It's just lights.
Oh, 100%.
But when I
say that to myself.
But
I say that to myself.
I'm getting body reactions. Like I actually, because I'm so obsessive with the lighting in my house. Like I have 4 or 5 different lighting settings in this room because lighting really fundamentally affects me. When I was a kid, there was fluorescent lighting in school. And if I ever accidentally looked up and looked at the fluorescent lighting, it blinded me for like 2 or 3 seconds and I would have a panic attack. And so lighting has huge connotations for me. So just listening to your story, I'm actually not just hearing it, I'm feeling it. Yeah. But here's what's interesting. The blame and the shame that you feel because you're not changing it, there's no, like, not once did I hear, I think you did say, I need to get somebody to come in here and I'll just pay him some money. But you know what, Adi, how obvious is it that you could hire a handyman for probably $50 to $100 to come in and do everything you just said, unless they're changing out the actual lights, then it would probably be $400 or $500. But at the same time, dude, what is your time worth?
It's a single, like, it's a plug. It's a single plug they have to put in. It's the easiest thing ever. And I could honestly, you know what's funny, even as we're talking about it, I could probably say to the person, look, you get to take all these lights with you and do whatever you want with them. So lower my price by like $1 per one of these lights you get to take with you, because you can sell them. They're like $40 each. Like, go do whatever you want with them later. But again, right, this is the thing. And you said something else once that I really loved, which was, you're this kind of person that we're talking about right now. If you have a to-do list, and the to-do list is just kind of like this endless list of things. On the to-do list is, get toilet paper, make scrambled eggs in the morning for the kids, start a new company, trade in the car, plan your plot of burial ground. Like, it's like this random list of things, but the problem is there is no order or priority. They're all equally important. And so you lose yourself every morning. And I had to do a lot of work on myself to say, you know what, I can't function like this anymore. Like, I can't have 70 things that are equally important, because none of them ever get done in a way that's satisfactory, because that whole perfectionism thing that I have means that I will always feel like I'm leaving it behind. I have to get better, exactly as we're talking about right now, at handing off things.
Well, let's talk about that. So I have an interesting way of looking at that, Adi. See, I think as entrepreneurs, we need more help than the average. I call this the entrepreneurial dilemma. We need far more help than the average person to get to where we want to go. But anytime we have to request help, we call it protection and support. It leaves us feeling vulnerable and exposed. Well, why is that? When we look at our society today, we have a deficit-based evaluation of human beings exclusively. But DSM-5 is this thick, and Strength Finders is this thick. It's a good analogy to how we really look at humans, only I think it's more like this and like this. And there's a reason. Whenever there's a negative behavior in the world, I back away and I say, okay, wait, why does this exist? There's got to be a reason for it. Well, if you look at us as human beings, evolutionarily, if you only had one eye, I needed to know about it, because if I was running next to you and there was a woolly mammoth coming at us, I know I'm exposed. And so finding deficits in human beings is a survival instinct. And the issue that we have in our evaluation of human beings across the board is that we evaluate deficit. There is hardly any looking at, what if this blind person actually has higher sensitivities in hearing and scent? What if this person who can't talk because they're mute actually is one of the best judges of character that there is? What if this person, like, God, I told you when I was younger, I was referred to as retarded. So I kind of took on that mantle when I was younger. And there was a kid in my school who had Down syndrome, and I was really close friends with the kid with Down syndrome. And you know what, Adi? There's a magic to people with Down syndrome. There's an acceptance there. There's an ability to shift your state in a moment. Like, I've got a friend, Chip Franks here in Austin, and his son Alec has Down syndrome. I love that kid. Like, I can't be around that kid without my heart swelling to, like, it's going to come out of my chest. And we look at people like that and it's like, oh, poor kid. What do you mean, poor kid? There is abilities and strengths there that you can't even see. They're energetic. They're real. And so, I think in the world, I think a lot of the reason that there is so many people who feel broken is that we have this way of evaluating people where we just look for deficit. It's the easiest thing to find. And we don't have a lot of construct in the world or dialogue or practice around finding people's strengths.
I totally agree. I mean, that's why the F shame thing is so strong for everything we do.
Oh, yeah.
And I try to make sure that people understand F shame is not only about don't let other people shame you. That's a very important part of the equation. Don't shame yourself and stop shaming other people.
Yeah.
And that's a really hard one for a lot of people to hear, because there's a lot of there's a lot of pent up frustration and sometimes aggression, but definitely, this idea of resentments towards other people who've harmed you. And I always say to everybody, just remember, those people around you, even if they completely missed the mark, were trying to do the best they had given the tools they had at the moment. And when you can see things from that perspective, we're in the middle of this election right now that's being played out. I think it holds for everybody, everywhere, all the time. Are there these anomalies of people who are literally just seeking evil and to destroy the world? Absolutely. But they're absolute anomalies, and running your life based on those people makes for a very, very miserable life. Honestly, Alex, I feel like we can carry this conversation for like an hour and a half. I know there's so much stuff that you guys are doing, and it's really interesting. And I love the idea of tying together. I literally, in the Hero program, I talk about what your beliefs are related to addiction and quote unquote addicts again, and then talk about your beliefs of what it takes to be a successful person and what success means. And I show people that they're antithetical. And because they're antithetical, you keep yourself stuck because you think you hold on to all these negative attributes, but very few of these positive attributes. So I want to switch us for a split second to talk about the work that you do with people. Is you mentioned momentum and like really driving people towards finding that thing that gives them momentum. Now you do it with an entrepreneurial framework, and you really help people understand sort of what they need to do to get to the next stage in their entrepreneurial development. Talk to me more about where you came from, all those struggles you had. You were working as I don't remember if it was an advisor or in kind of deeply within some corporate structures doing work like this, consulting, but your life was kind of in shambles and falling apart. Walk us through that process of how you transitioned yourself from this way of functioning into this way of being now, where not only taking care of your well-being health-wise is super important for you, but also your relationship. I know we connect a lot around that, and you and Katie, your wife, are very much involved together in some of the work, just like Sophie and I are at Ignited. And then taking all these lessons that allowed you to create this life and parlaying that into helping other people.
I think, man, that's a big question. I agree with you that I think people, for the most part, want to be good people. And I always wanted to be a good person. And when I was younger, I always felt like I was the kid who was born without the operating system that everybody else had. I would look around and think like, why is this so easy for everybody else? This is really hard for me. And when I was in my early 20s, I ran businesses in my teens because as soon as I found business, it felt natural to me. It felt like that's where I really belonged. It felt like that's where I could succeed. And so in my 20s, I was running a consultancy, and I ended up being able to consult with and be one-on-one with wildly successful people, founders of businesses, people that were worth hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars. And because I was always inquisitive, I would ask very personal questions. And these days, with the self-awareness that I have today, I'm like, man, I'm glad I wasn't this self-aware in my 20s, or I never would have asked those questions. But the questions I would, what was that?
I feel the same way.
So I used to ask questions like, well, tell me, what do you personally do? Like, what are your beliefs? And I would ask, what would you tell someone at my age? What would you have told me, yourself when you were your age, like, or when you were my age? What would be the advice you'd give? And indeed, there was this consistency over time with people saying things like personal habits, or the choices you make personally, or the way you spend your day, or what you do on a daily basis, or how you get up in the morning. And there was this consistency of like, man, process, structure, routine was the message. And I had such a hard time hearing it, because what I wanted to do was I wanted to be free. I wanted to do what I wanted to do every day. I would get frustrated when the same calendar was on, or the same meeting was on my calendar 2 weeks in a row. So I was getting this messaging of like personal habits, process, structure, routine. And I'm like, but I want to be free, and I want to be a successful entrepreneur. And I had this idea in my head that the only way to create freedom was to not have those things. And what happened over time was I added more process, structure, and routine to what I was doing. I increased the level of success that I had, and I almost had to kind of sneak it up on myself, because even today I fight it sometimes. This is what I teach. This is our whole body of content. And I'll find like I get up on a Sunday and I don't do my morning routine, and I don't even realize it until 11 a.m. And I'm like, oh, no wonder I feel terrible today. And so for me, it was a long process of letting go of this impression I had of freedom and recognizing that the most free people I knew, the most liberated people I knew, actually relied almost entirely on process, structure, and routine, and people around them to help them.
I love it. Jocko Willink has this saying that, how does it go? Sorry. For editors, I want to get this quote right so I don't mess it up. I'll say it again. Jocko has this saying, discipline equals freedom.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're talking about here right now, is this idea that we think freedom means do whatever you want, whenever you want. What freedom actually typically means for a lot of us, especially people like us, is create very particular boundaries that you play well within, and then stay and do whatever you want within that park, right? On that field. Now you can do whatever you want. But the moment you stray off those boundaries, all hell breaks loose. Yeah,
it's funny, Adi. I share this a lot with entrepreneurs, and I have this discussion with them about process, structure, and routine, and that process actually relieves entrepreneurial anxiety. Process relieves client anxiety. If you have somebody who comes to you for help and there's a clear spelled out process that's there in advance, that's been used before, they go, oh, this is who I need to work with. If somebody comes to you for help and you're feeling around and they don't feel that process, that structure, they're going to have anxiety around it. I was sharing this with a group of entrepreneurs a while ago, and somebody in the audience was like, well, how do you explain somebody like Richard Branson? And I said, well, in what regard? And he said, well, Branson lives really free. Like, look at him. He's out kite surfing and, hanging out in the ocean. And I'm like, I think I need to help you with this. So let's get real about Richard Branson. Richard Branson owns an island where he has created an entire environment where he doesn't experience anything he's not expecting. Branson has the highest level of process, structure, and routine of any entrepreneur I know. And when he had the 75 or 80 people come out so that he could kite surf with a naked girl on his back and they could get the helicopter shots of it, I guarantee you that was planned 3 weeks in advance. Oh. And they knew exactly what they were going to be doing. And he had the lessons already, and they knew that they weren't going to kill him. And that's why there's a perfect Instagram shot of Branson skipping across the water with a naked woman on his back, because they had a helicopter flying at 12 feet above the water to capture it.
Yeah. And so that's like the people who believe Jennifer Aniston is dating whoever she is in the movie with, it's like
right. It's like
no, man, let me explain.
Yeah, there's a veneer here that is created on, and I think, does Branson have an extraordinary life? Absolutely. I know people who know him personally, who spent time with him, and he really does have an extraordinary life. But even he has massive guardrails up and massive barriers up. And it's funny, people say Branson is one of the most free people in the world. Branson's idea of freedom is isolation on an island where he knows everybody.
Right.
Right? Let's get real about who we really are.
No, so true. So true. And again, in the same vein as what we're talking about here broadly, when you recreate the definition of what that success that you are aiming for looks like, you get to have a more realistic version of it, right? If you're aiming for something that doesn't exist, it's just like that normal conversation we were talking about earlier, right? If you think Mark Cuban, if you think Mark Cuban just shoots around ball with the Dallas Mavericks and just hangs out all day, then you have no idea what he has to do and what he's had to do to create that world. If you think, by the way, because a lot of people talk to me about this, I talk about how I beat my addiction. I don't wake up on any given day anymore and worry that my addiction is coming back. It's just not a thing. People assume that what that means is that I've let go of sort of caring how substances enter my life and what I do. And it's the exact opposite. I've just created a life with these really beautiful guardrails and this really flexible way of seeing and structure within those days of what needs to happen in my day. So I never have to go back to those things. And that's so great that you talk about the difference between the fantasy of success and success itself. I think you said this once in a podcast episode, I think something along the lines of, if anybody's promising you that they can help you run your life on autopilot and you never have to do anything and it'll just work, run the other way.
That is the most dangerous person you know. Well, and it's there's so much evidence of the fact that process, structure, and routine creates success. Michael Dell has a quote, show me a great idea without a framework and you will not have a business. Show me a passable idea with a framework and I'll show you $1 billion company. So what he's trying to, the impression, and I'm paraphrasing, but the impression he was trying to give is like, look, if you work within a structure, you have a chance at success. It doesn't matter how good your idea is, take it outside of a structure, outside of a framework, you're going to have a very hard time gaining perspective and understanding if you're moving forward. And so, one of the things that we sell is our momentum planner. It's a structure, it's a product for structure and for daily structure. And there's a way I have people create the plan around how they're going to use the momentum planner. And for me, Adi, it's how much can we change and shift in your life all at once and right away? Like how much of an impression of what you need in your life can we shift right now all at once? Because that's where behavioral change really occurs. When we attack what's going on, when we say, this is all that I need to change, and when we have an awareness and realization of what we really want in our lives. And so it's interesting because I think the impression in the market is there's all these subtle things you can do that will just create success. And in my experience, success and behavioral change comes from making radical changes and radical adjustments and really, dramatic changes in your life. And I think that for anybody who's dealing with addiction, and I've had so many clients and so many friends and family members, and myself included, who have gone through very negative addictive periods in our life. A lot of times when you're in that negative addictive period, a lot of people will tell you, just take one thing at a time or just change a little bit. I do the opposite. I'm like, let's just change everything. Let's shuffle the cards so hard that you have a new reality that you're walking into and an entirely new way of approaching what you're doing. And it gets results. It gets massive results.
I love it. You talked about momentum planner. The momentum planner is, I use pieces of it. I always take these like little pieces from the world and I create a version that works for me. But I've got to say the first like list making planner that I've been able to use, because it's so simple, right? Yeah. Just like a handful of small steps that you gotta go through every single day. There's so much that I feel like people who have felt different, have felt like they're stuck, have felt like they're somehow constitutionally unable to achieve what they want, need to hear this message that it's almost like two sides of the same coin. You can decide to look at one side or the other, but there are tools and techniques that can help you leverage exactly what you think is your weakness right now into this strength that will get you everything you want in life. I think that's a really, really important message. For anybody who's listening right now and doesn't know this, then Alex has the Momentum podcast, which is a really, really beautiful way to tune into. You always share these little, it's the relatively small nuggets every time so that they're easily digestible. And then you have all these tools, like even the Entrepreneurial Personality type book, it's a small book, so it's easy to digest, it's easy to process. Some of you listening right now the idea of reading another book is like, oh my God, I can't read another book. This is one of those things you can finish while like drinking your coffee and eating lunch in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Which is really, really nice.
And anyone who wants to, I didn't mean to cut you off, Adi.
Just some other tools, some other things that you have.
I was just saying, anyone who wants to check out the podcast, they can go to Momentum Podcast, and it's just momentumpodcast.com. And I just had a thought that I want to share, because I've been really excited about being specifically on your podcast, Adi, because I feel like sometimes our language doesn't line up identically, but our sentiment lines up like crazy. And so many times I've listened to your podcast and I get chills, or I listen to something you're saying and I'll get like this huge body reaction, because I'm like, man, it's so, I'm getting a little emotional. It's validating. It's validating at a different level for me, because you'll say something that I'm like, man, I try to explain that to people all the time. I didn't know anyone else thinks that way. And you do. And, we have this marketing slogan, our marketing is different than most companies. One of our stickers that we give out, one of the things we tell people is, there is nothing wrong with you and you are not alone. And the reason that I make that statement, there's nothing wrong with you and you are not alone. And really the first part is what's important to me is there's nothing wrong with you. And here's why. I think that in the world today, because we have this deficit-based society, and because we have this exception-based society, we're looking for two things, especially when people are growing up. We're looking for where are you different and where are you not as good as everybody else? Because we're going to beat that out of you. We actually live in a society where the stated goal of our educational system is standardization. It's not a joke. The stated goal is standardization. We want to pop out identical people that all look the same. And the challenge with that is that for anybody who has different sensitivities or abilities, what ends up happening is those are recognized or seen as weaknesses and challenges and issues. And so here's what I'd like to share with people who are sharing or listening in your audience, because I'm part of this audience. And here's what I want anyone who's listening to know. If you're listening to the two of us, I want you to really think about that statement. There's nothing wrong with you, because here's what I know about people like us. It doesn't matter what issue or challenge or diagnosis or disability or whatever it is you're dealing with right now, somebody like us has had that thing and has gone on to change the world. Yeah. And when you look at history, anyone who matters to be remembered, anyone who you remember right now, anyone who stands out for you, I've shared some of the ones who stand out for me today. But for me, when I first read about Einstein, it was like, oh my God, a kindred spirit. I'm not broken. Mm-hmm. And because I couldn't tie my shoes as a kid. And it was talked about a lot when I was younger. And it kind of made me feel shame every time it came up, because my younger sister used to tie my shoes. So it was told as a positive story about her. And every time I'd be like hiding in the corner. And here's what I want you to think about. If you go through history and you look at every person who matters to be remembered and did something significant, they were just like us. And so if you've related to what we're talking about and you have those people in history and you're here feeling like you want to do something different and make a change and step up and do something, then I want you to know something. You are part of the most important club in history. The small group of people that get up every day, go into the future, imagine a new reality, come back to the present and demand it becomes real. Mm-hmm. And if you feel any resonance to that statement, then I want you to know something. Don't question whether you are one of us or not. Understand that it is your birthright. This is who you are. You are one of us, and you can go out and do what you want, overcome whatever's bothering you right now, overcome the obstacles in your way, treat the obstacles as the solution to actually getting to where you want to go, and go on to change the world, because throughout history, it's people exactly like us who always have.
I love it. I'm going to drop the mic. Well, I'm not going to really drop it, but that was a mic drop moment. Yes. And I've seen so many stories of success after that downfall that just exemplify exactly what you're talking about. And obviously the two of us sitting here are two of those examples, but there are much bigger and much greater, much more powerful and popular examples of that. And so it's not hard to find them. You just have to stop looking at what the fantasy version of success looks like, and you will find them all around you.
Yeah, no question.
Amen. Thank you so much for joining. I'm so honored that you joined me here today. I will continue following your work, but we will have links to all of your stuff so everybody here gets to enjoy it as well.
Adi, I just want you to know, man, I have a tremendous amount of respect for the work that you do. I am not a fan of a lot of the members that we have in programs. I'm a huge fan of yours. And I've become more over the past year as we've worked together, as I've gotten to know you, as I've gotten to know your character, and then also the work that you're doing in the world. And I think it has incredible importance. And I also believe that the biggest breakthroughs are yet to come. So I just want you to continue doing what you're doing, and I will be following you and hope to be a part of it, man.
Thank you so much, brother. You're already a part of it. I know you all listen and are just full of things to share with us. I always, of course, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast, but I care more right now for you to just screenshot this, tag Alex, tag me at Dr. Addict Jaffe and Alex Charfen. And just let us know, like, what's the lesson that you just learned right now that you're going to go and apply in your life immediately. Thank you so much, my friend. Have an amazing rest of your week and weekend. And for those of you listening, I'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Ignited Heroes Recovery Podcast. I really hope you found the information here useful and that we'll see you back here next week. And look, I want to make sure that this podcast is the most useful it can be for you, so please let me know by emailing info@ignited.com if there are any specific topics or questions you'd like to have addressed. As usual, if you like this episode, I would love for you to leave us a 5-star review and rating. Thanks, and see you next week.